I'd seen so many guys getting married to Filipinas, bringing them back with them to the States and having successful marriages. I'd never been to the Philippines, but I met a girl online and I really wanted to bring her to live in the States with me. All my buddies told me I was crazy, but I was 55 and still 10 years away from retirement, and I was lonely. I don't think there's any shame admitting your feelings, but I was lonely and I desperately wanted company. I hadn't been in a serious relationship, no matter how hard I tried, for years, and that's when I started looking further afield than home. The girl I met was real sweet. She was from the Negros Island, where she lived with her family. She said she was very poor and just wanted a better life to help her and her family. She had 2 kids, but her old boyfriend just left her with them, and she was responsible for being the main breadwinner of the family. She said she works and didn't earn much money. I never did quite find out what she did, but whatever it was on the island, it's where she came from. I'd been warned that it's important not to send money to anyone, no matter what they say, and she never asked me for money. She just said she wanted to meet me and come and live with me in America. I'd never met her, but this was the most female attention I'd had in a long time. But the thought of travelling all the way to the Philippines made me feel nervous. I'd never left my state before, let alone America. I didn't even have a passport. But I couldn't shrug off this chance of being with this amazing girl that I'd met. I imagined my life with her in it. I had a house in my state. I was from Mississippi, about 50 miles out of Jackson, and that's where I grew up, worked and lived, and planned to retire. I was speaking to this girl. She was called Raina, every day for a lot of weeks, and I knew how hard it would be to get her to America with me unless I went to see her first. I was 55 and she was 28, but she told me that age was just a number, and she kept telling me to go and see her. I looked into everything and I would need to fly to Manila. It was so far out of my comfort zone that I said to her, I'll fly to the Philippines if you go and meet me in Manila at the airport. She was very excited when I told her this. She said she'd love to go and meet me at the airport in Manila, but she couldn't afford to do that, so could I send her the money so she could get there? She only wanted $100, so I thought that was worthwhile. I put in an application for a passport, which I received not long after, then actually booked a 2-week vacation to the Philippines. I was very nervous to be leaving America. This was all I had ever known all my life, but the thought of maybe being with someone and having a proper relationship was too tempting to let up. It took such a long time to get to Manila. I had to change planes twice, and when I got there, I felt like I had made the biggest mistake I'd ever made. Walking off the plane, everything seemed so different and so unlike what I was used to. It made me really nervous, but true to her word, Raina was waiting for me at the airport. She looked even more beautiful than she did on the pictures and on the calls that we had together, and I couldn't believe that she wanted to be with me. I felt immediately at ease as soon as I met her. She told me to book a hotel in BGC, a part of Manila that's very developed, and that's what I did before I left. You might call me a weirdo, but I actually booked 2 rooms, one for each of us, but when we got to the hotel, she looked quite offended that I'd booked 2 rooms and just said that I was trying to be respectful. But she said she'd been so excited to see me, she wanted to share my room. That got my heart racing. My initial impressions of Raina was that she was sweet, honest, and down to earth, who just so happened to be born into a poor family. She seemed to have dreams, just like I had, but she didn't have the opportunity to be able to fulfill them. I felt like I loved her when I was speaking to her online, but when I met her in person, that was it. I was sold, and I wanted her, and I wanted to take her back to America with me as quickly as possible. I told her that that's what I wanted to do. That was my plan. Would you move to America with me? And she said she'd love to do that. She showed me around Manila, but I felt out of place and uncomfortable there. I didn't really feel safe, and I don't know why, but after a few more days of being there, I started to get used to it, and if anything, it grew on me, and I understood why some guys actually moved and lived in the Philippines. I was speaking to one guy that I met who was from America. He said he lived in Cebu in a beautiful house with his Filipino wife. He talked about how it was so much cheaper to live in the Philippines, how your money went further, and they didn't have all the politics that we had back at home. At least that what we needed to be bothered about. We could live here a lot cheaper than we could in America. Everything that he'd said did ring true. We'd go out for a meal, and it was a lot less than I would spend for the equivalent back home. The hotel I was staying at was a third of the price of an equivalent hotel in America, and getting about the place was cheap as well. That was the first time I thought maybe I should move to the Philippines and live here. That will be a lot easier than taking Raina back to America, and because things were cheaper here, I could have enough to be able to live there right now. I spoke to Raina, and she said that she would prefer to go to America with me. I saw the benefits of working for more years and saving more money. We could always move to the Philippines at some point in the future. I'd never had a girl like this before, and I think I was under her spell. I wanted to marry her as quickly as I could to make her mine, and I did ask for her after only 5 days, and she readily agreed. I went to the US Embassy to find out about a visa for her, and it was going to be a long and drawn-out process. I had to extend my stay in the Philippines to get everything I needed to be able to marry Raina, and I stayed in the Philippines 3 weeks longer than I thought I was going to. Returning home was really upsetting. Raina cried at the airport when I left. I'd given her enough money to get back home and given her some spending money, but she still cried when I left. It took over 6 months for the visa to finally come through, but during those 6 months, I supported her financially so she didn't need to work and so she could spend more time with her family before she left. I sent her about $800 a month, which I was told was more than I should be sending, but she was my wife and I wanted the best for her. I can remember when I met her at the airport, it felt like things had gone a full 360 since she met me at the airport in Manila. She was smiling from ear to ear, and I couldn't hold in my excitement. I drove her to my house and showed her around, and she thought it was amazing. That's the word she used. She said it was so different to where she used to live, and she was so happy to be in America with me. We came to an agreement that I would send money to her family every month. I didn't see a problem with this while I was working. I could afford to send the money, and I wanted to help her family because they were so poor. It only felt right. I agreed to send $600 a month to her family in the Philippines. I was still working hard at my job, but she'd always be at home when I got back, and she started cooking me all kinds of Filipino foods. Some of them I liked, some of them I didn't. But she was also good at cooking American things, and that's what I preferred to eat. She played the perfect wife. I couldn't believe how lucky I was. She never strayed away from me, she always showed me respect, and when I went to meet with buddies, she went along. She was always acting like I was the boss, but not in a negative way, just to show that she was being a great wife. A few years went by, and I could tell, on the surface, she appeared happy, but something was going on with her that she wasn't talking to me about. All I wanted was for her to be happy, so I tried asking her to see if there's anything I could do. She just said that she missed her family in the Philippines. She'd never left the Philippines before, but she was happy with me, but she really wanted to go back to the Philippines soon. I was happy where we were, but I could tell that the longer she stayed in America, the more miserable she was becoming. She never stopped being a great wife to me, but her happiness was very important to me, and I remembered back to the Philippines and the thought of living there. And because it was cheaper, we could just go and move there and have enough money to be able to live. I wasn't rich. I had my house, but that wasn't worth a lot, and I had some other savings. With everything pulled together, I could get maybe $500,000, and I thought about it, and one day at work, I just thought, I don't need to do this anymore. There's nothing stopping me from moving with Raina to the Philippines. When I got home from work that day, she'd already prepared me a meal, and she was looking as beautiful as ever. But when I told her that I think we can now move to the Philippines, her face lit up, and I explained that I can sell the house and we can get everything together, and we're going to have enough money to be able to live there. She looked so happy, and in turn that made me happy. But if I think about it, when I said live in the Philippines, and her thought of living in the Philippines, those were two very different things. To me, I pictured renting a small place near the beach and living a basic but fun existence. I didn't know what she had in mind, but I thought that it would be similar to what I wanted. We spent another 8 months in America, and all we talked about was going to the Philippines. When she told her family she was moving back, they were all happy, and they said we should go and live on the island to be close to them. It was quite convenient to get there, but it wasn't really on the tourist trap like some of the other places that you hear about. I just wanted to take things as they came and be sensible and make sure that what we'd had would last us as long as it needed to. But when we finally got back to the Philippines, I could tell just how happy she was. She loved the Philippines, and I didn't really know anything about it. I'd never met her family before, despite us being married, and that's where we headed first. I had been spending a few days in Manila just to get over the long flight. It was a really beautiful village where she was from, and I found out about a popular destination on the island called Dumaguete. That was about 45 minutes from where she was from. Things moved very quickly when we got there. Her family were also friendly and nice people, and I was still giving them $600 a month, but I was waiting for the right time to say that we needed to stop at this now we're in the Philippines and reduce the amount we would spend. After being in the village for a number of days, luckily not far away there was a hotel that was bearable for me to stay in. It wasn't like anything I was used to, but it did the job. We went to Dumaguete, and I thought the place was perfect. It had more going on than where she came from, more bars and restaurants, and it was close to the sea. It felt like a really ideal location for us to live, and we did rent somewhere there early on during our time in the Philippines. I hadn't yet talked about money and reducing the amount I gave to her family, but she was talking about building a house. Instead of renting all the time, we could build a house close to her family. That way she could see her family all the time, and we wouldn't need to pay rent. I didn't know what to think of this idea, but every time she spoke about it, she seemed so happy thinking about what her dream house would be like. I didn't know how much it would cost to build, but she said we wouldn't need anything too big or flashy. An amount of $50,000 was talked about for us to get something that would be okay. I didn't know what to think, but she persuaded me, and we did build a house close to her family on land that belonged to Raina. I did buy the land for her, and we put the house together and did it in a nice way, but we spent $100,000 on the land and the house, and that was a lot more than I wanted to spend, and a lot more than I thought I was going to have to spend, and I still hadn't spoken about money and the need to stop giving her family it. When the house was built and we moved in, I had the rest of my savings giving me about 5%, which was about $20,000 a year. We'd been living in the house for a month, and I told Raina that my income had just been reduced, so we needed to stop giving money to her family. I expected her to take that normally, sort of like, thank you so much for helping out over the past years, and I understand that now we need to concentrate about us, because that's all we can afford. That's what I thought she was going to say. Had been with her for quite a number of years now, and I thought I knew her. But when I told her this, that I couldn't afford to keep her family as well, she looked at me like I was an alien. She told me how her family relied on this money, and without it they're going to really struggle. And I told her that without it I'm going to really struggle. We moved to the Philippines, which is what you wanted to do. I've built a house, which is what you wanted. And now we have an income to live on, and I can't afford to give money to your family. I can give them $150 a month, and that's it. She could see I was serious, but she didn't like it. I think she was worried about what she was going to tell her family, but the way she changed after I told her that wasn't expected. If the money kept coming in the same way as it had, there would have been no way for me to even know what kind of person she was deep down, because she would have always acted the same. But when I told her this, I saw a side of her that I didn't even know before. I suppose because I'd never tried to withhold money from her or her family before. So it was my fault, I didn't think. So I told her that she didn't tell her family, we wouldn't be able to give them anything, and we would just have to stop and not tell them. She told me that I'd have to go with her to talk to her family, which I did, and they were actually more understanding than she was. They told me not to worry about it, just look after yourself and Raina. And they said $150 was better than nothing, and they appreciated the help. But she didn't like it, and she didn't like having to tell her parents this. She wanted to come across as being rich, even though it wasn't her money, and I didn't feel like I knew her the same anymore. We moved into the house, and that was great. I never got used to the power going off all the time. All the time the power's off. Not all the time, but more than you'd expect it to. So you could be sat there watching TV and then bang, the power goes off. And of course that knocks the AC off as well, and it gets very hot there. It was an interesting time, but Raina was just not the same anymore. I hadn't stopped helping her with money. I hadn't stopped giving money to her, and I was supporting her. But just because I couldn't afford to give money to her family anymore, she was a different person. I wanted more than anything for her to go back to being her old self, and I even asked her and told her, what can I do to make you go back to how you were before? What did she say? Not much to start with, but when we talked about it, some days later she came to me and said that maybe if we could give her family some money to do their own business, then we wouldn't need to give them any money every month. We could help them out in a big way, and then that will be better for us later on. I didn't really know what she meant by this, but I listened to her, and she said that her family could open a business. I didn't know what that meant or what that involved, but she said if we could give them maybe $50,000, we'll never have to give them any more money. I didn't want to give her family $50,000. That was the last thing I wanted to do, but I did it anyway. Why? Because I wanted Raina to turn back to how she was before. When we spoke to her family, they talked about the business they wanted to do. I didn't even understand it, but I actually agreed to give them this money. I feel really like it was emotional blackmail from Raina, and the fact that I actually gave them the money was stupid for me to do. Things did seem to improve. She seemed to be happy again, because she showed her family that she was indeed rich. Maybe that was what it was, and she was behaving like she used to do with me, and I felt like I had my wife back. I was happy again, and I was just starting to get used to living in the Philippines. I'd been there for months and months, but it took me a while to get used to just how different things were to America. Time was going by, and things were going great. I felt like I was the happiest I'd ever been. We didn't have much money to spend every month, but it was enough for us to eat out all the time, and it was enough to do the things I wanted to do, and that was all that mattered to me. But when I found out that the family hadn't opened a business and had blown all the money, they bought a brand new car and spent money fixing up their house, and now they didn't have any money again, I couldn't believe it. I spoke to Raina like I thought they were meant to be doing a business, and she said she thought that too. But she said, never mind, as long as they're happy, that's okay. But guess what happened not long after? Raina comes to me saying that her family needs some more money. Can we give them $1,000? I couldn't believe she asked me after the $50,000, and I was really upset with her. She could see how upset I was, but she said her family needed it, and I think that was the first time, but I understood that her family came first. I don't just mean first, I mean first even in front of herself. What could I do? I wanted to say no, but if I said no, what would happen? I just wanted to continue living like we were living until I died. That's the truth of it. 20 years, however long it would be. I just wanted to continue living this life without any stress or worry. But she was giving me stress now, but the £1,000 I gave and just hoped they wouldn't ask for more. You know they did. A few months later, they damaged a car and didn't have proper insurance or something like that and wanted $5,000. This time, I had to say no, and Raina took that personally. She cared so much about her family and making sure they were okay, she forgot to think about us. Or she never cared about us, but I said no. She became visibly cold from that moment. She was like a different person than I knew. I wasn't prepared to give any money to her family. She moved into the spare bedroom, and I'm just starting to think like I've made the worst mistake I've ever made. A few days later, she came into the bedroom one morning smiling at me, and that was the first time I thought she's after something here. She wants something from me, and she got on the bed and put her arm around me. I didn't think my wife's finally come around. I thought, wait for it. And just as expected, she said she was sorry about asking for $5,000 before. She shouldn't have asked for that for her family, but they're really struggling now. Is there any way we can give them $1,000? What was I to do? Watch as my money went down and just accept that? Make it last as long as possible? Or try to put my foot down and said no? I was too weak, and I agreed with $1,000. She became herself again, but it happened again, more money later. And I got to the point where I just had to cut my losses and tell her I'm not giving any more money. Stay with me or not, but I'm not giving any more money to your family. She said, fine, don't, but I'm not going to sleep in the same bedroom as you. She was now blackmailing me. We were having a lot of arguments than we were before, a lot more fights, and she kicked me out because I refused to hand over more money. I think she had a vision in her mind of who she was. She was the provider for her family. She was the one who was able to make sure her family was good. But she didn't realize that that was coming from me. And because it was coming from me, that negatively affected me and her. She didn't care at all. She just cared about her family. That was a bitter experience after she kicked me out of the house that I had built. I had no authority over it. And when I was alone, I didn't feel comfortable being in the Philippines. I went back to America. I was lucky that I still had savings. Not as much as I should have had. I wasted way too much. But I had enough to buy a small house close to where I had my old one, and I got back to that way of life. I'm still married to Raina, and the only time she ever calls me was when she was asking for money, saying can we make things work again. She was basically trying to tell me that if I give her, I think it was $2,000 she was after, she would happily let me go and live back in the house. But I got to the point where I knew this was just emotional blackmail. I just picked the wrong girl. I picked the wrong one. If I was a multimillionaire, I bet I'd still be with her now, because I hadn't seen that side of her, because it never had a chance to come into light. But I wasn't, and although I lost a lot of money to her, I am proud of myself that I stood my ground and didn't give more than I actually did. That's my story. Take from it what you will.